Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. It is the week of November 28th, and this is your Monday briefing. The House and Senate return this week after last week's Thanksgiving recess. Key legislation to be addressed when Congress returns includes a bill to fund the federal government beyond December 16th, when the current temporary spending measure expires. Looking ahead, the new 118th Congress begins in January, and it will be, as you've no doubt heard a few times already by now, a divided government. Republicans will have a narrow majority of the House, and Democrats will retain a slim majority in the Senate. PwC Senior Policy Advisor Dave Camp and Janice Mays, a Managing Director in our Tax Policy Services practice, join us to talk about what divided government may mean for tax policy. Welcome to you both.
Well, thank you, Sindhu. Janice, good to see you.
It's always good to see both of you. Thanks for having us.
So the key to a year-end tax bill, which is something that our viewers are following very closely, is the continuing resolution. So, Chairman Camp, let me start with you. What is the state of play?
Well, as you point out, it was a holiday week last week. They still have yet to decide on a top-line number. How much will the government spend in the next year? And then obviously have to decide which agencies spend whatever. And some of that depends on how they resolve funding for our military. And they haven't made a lot of progress on that, but they have until December 16th, until this current CR runs out. So there already is some talk that they may extend that CR to later in December. But they haven't run out of time yet, but time is starting to get short on getting a full year-long funding bill called an omnibus done before the end of the year.
Janice?
And for those that want tax issues to be addressed at the end of the year, they need that threshold question of the appropriation bill, a long-term version of it happening. Otherwise, there won't be a train to ride. So we're really looking for that. We're still hopeful that happens. And then the second step, where Democrats and Republicans can come together on some tax extenders.
Thank you. And Chairman Camp, I want to come to you. You know, with the Republicans taking control of the House and Ways and Means Ranking Member Kevin Brady retiring, the Ways and Means Committee will be looking for a new chairman. Can you give us some insight into how the next chairman will be determined?
Well, it's an internal process, Sindhu, and it's through a committee called the Steering Committee. And the Steering Committee is made up of members of Congress. And what the Republicans do is they divide the country up into different regions, each region having, by state, each region having between 10 and 15 members of Congress. And then there's an election within those various steering committee areas, and they make a representative to this full committee that ultimately decides who the chairman of the committee is going to be. Also on that steering committee are leadership, and generally leadership have a weighted number of votes. I think what's important to note in this group is there are some states that are so large, Texas and Florida, that they actually have two members on this steering committee. And then California and New York are large enough that they have their own individual member. But most areas are a collection of several states to get to the 10 to 15 Republicans in order to get a seat on the steering committee. And that's the group that decides who the next chairman is going to be.
Janice, let me come to you. How will seats on the committee be chosen?
The process for both Democrats and Republicans in the House is very similar to what Chairman Camp just suggested for the chairmanship. The regions nominate, the steering committee then makes the big nomination of a slate of members for membership, and then the party caucuses make the final vote on it. And the ratio of the committee has been 25 in the majority and 18 in the minority. And at the moment, the Republican leadership has said they're going to continue that ratio in size for the committee. So the Republicans would have 10 seats to fill in this context. They're bringing back 15 members, and they would get to add 10 new members. The Democrats have a tougher job. They have to shrink their side of the committee roster from the 22 they're bringing back to 18. So the four most recently assigned members to the committee will step aside for a while and sit on other committees while they wait for a Democratic slot to open up. And it's done this way just to give everybody a chance, a say at who gets on the committee and try to spread the wealth around the country.
All right, and Chairman Camp, I want to come to you for this last question. You've both worked on Capitol Hill for a long time, for a number of years, and sometimes in a divided government. And I want to ask you, the committees that we watch mostly from a tax perspective are Ways and Means and Senate Finance. How do you see those two committees approaching agenda setting based on Republican and Democratic priorities for both domestic and international tax issues?
Well, Sindhu, that's exactly the relationship I had, in the sense of there was a democratically controlled Senate and a Republican House when I was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And I think it's going to be very important for the leaders of those two tax writing committees to really start to get to know one another. And because there'll be a new chairman in the House side, that will be critical. And I remember getting advice when I first became chairman from a former chairman, and he said, get to the Senate. And it was important for me to do that. And if you can build a relationship not only between the two principals, but also between their staffs, there are going to be tax issues that have some bipartisan support that you're going to want to be able to work with each other on. And you never know what issues, events will bring forward to the Congress and to those tax writing committees. And so they will need to build those relationships. And so hopefully there will be some smaller issues they can work on, whether the tax issues are resolved in the lame duck or not. They may carry over to next year, and some of those have pretty good bipartisan support. Obviously, there's other issues that will go along with those tax issues, but it's going to be very important for them to do that. And educating members of the committees will be critical as well. And there'll be new members both on the Republican side in finance as well as on the Republican side in the House. And so getting to know the chairman of the Senate Finance, the lead Republican on Senate Finance, will be absolutely critical to the new chairman. And I hope whoever that is really takes that seriously and gets to work on building that connection.
All right, a lot of interesting navigating ahead for all. Janice, Chairman Camp, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out the latest episode on the recently released foreign tax credit regulations in the description of this episode. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Policy on Demand by using the QR code at the end of this episode. Thank you for spending this time with us. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.